panel changed. So if you're here for more than just a novel, you're out of luck, because we're here for genre bending, or genre benders, out-of-the-box science fiction, and fantasy novels that blur the lines of fantasy, sci-fi, I don't have to crouch down like that, I can go like this, and horror, romance, steampunk, etc. So that's what we're here for. And I'd like to, I don't know who everybody is, but I'm going to say someone's name, and if it's you, raise your hand, please. We have Lia Habel here, of Dearly Departed fame. Lia. Joel Archer, Dark Light of Day. Nice. Benjamin Tate of Leaves of Flame. Thanks, everybody. Stephen Walker of The Battle of Blood and Ink. Graphic novel. Kalayna Price of the Alex Croft novels. And Stephen Bein of Daughter of the Sword, and Myke Cole Shadow Ops series as well. So if we could maybe start here and go down the line, if you could, so you have maybe like a 45-second promo of your work and why you're here today.
My name is Steve Walker. I am the artist and co-creator of The Battle of Blood and Ink, Fable of the Flying City by Jared Axelrod. The book is about a young lady named Ash who lives on a flying city called Ampersand. And she prints a one-sheet newspaper called The Lurker's Guide to Ampersand. She finds out all the secret little hidden mysteries of the city, and she finds out the biggest secret of all, which is how the city flies. It's something that the provost of the city and her guardsmen don't want known. So it becomes a race against time for Ash and her cohorts, an air pirate, a autogyro pilot, and a rich boy, to try and get the secret out there.
I'm Myke Cole, and I'm the author of the Shadow Ops series. The first novel, Control Point, came out about almost a year ago. The second novel, Fortress Frontier, will be out in 4 months. And the best way to describe it is the blurb I got from Peter Brett, which is this Black Hawk Down meets the X-Men. So you got to figure you had an Army Delta Force team that was anchored by a sorcerer instead of a support weapon. That's basically the idea behind the story.
Hi, I'm Kalayna Price. I write the Alex Croft novels for Rock. They're about Witch Who Can Speak to the Dead, doesn't always like what the dead have to say. Fae are out of the mushroom ring, magic is something everyone uses, and Death himself is a character, so it's a whole lot of fun. There's a lot of mystery and some romance, so yeah.
Hi, I'm Lia Habel. I write the young adult series for Random House that is officially known as the Dearly series, but I started to refer to it as Gone with the Respiration, and Goodreads ran with that. It's a futuristic cyber-Victorian steampunk world with zombies, about 10 to 25% of which manage to hold on to their manners and morals after dying and can interact with the living for a short period of time. So we do have a hetero-mortal relationship at the core of the book. Basically, it's everything that I like mixed together and thrown on the page. So.
My pseudonym is Benjamin Tate, and I write dark fantasy, dark epic fantasy, and the idea behind the current series and the latest book is called Leaves of Flame is the fantasy world has discovered a new continent, and so in the first book they're attempting to settle the new continent, and so they kind of go off into the unexplored territory in like covered wagons, and then they meet really bad things. My real name is actually Joshua Palmatier, and I also have a series from DAW under that name as well.
I'm Steve Bein, and Daughter of the Sword is the first novel of the Faded Blades. The next one's due to come out next year. I'm very glad to be on this panel because an elevator pitch for this book is sort of tough because it crosses so many genres. It opens as what looks like a police thriller, but then starts looking like urban fantasy when my police detective finds out that the sword theft she's investigating the sword is claimed to be magical, and then it starts looking like historical fiction when we jump back in time and take a look at what the sword was doing in the hands of the samurai 700 years ago, and then 500 years ago, and in World War II, and so the book is it's a police thriller, urban fantasy, interspersed with historical fiction and historical fantasy. So it's a bit of a mouthful, which is why I'm glad to be on this panel.
I'm Jill Archer. I'm the author of Dark Light of Day. It's about Noon Onyx. She's a 21-year-old postgraduate magic user who has to choose between death or training to be a demon peacekeeper. So I was thrilled about this panel because my book is urban fantasy, but it also has elements of romance and mystery and even a little bit of legal fiction.
So I guess the first question that I want to ask, and then I'll also open it up to questions about 15 minutes before we're done, so you can ask any questions you want. How have you found, for, I don't know who of you is a first-time author and who of you has been going for a while, but those of you who, this is not your first book, how have you found the success of having sort of mixed genre works? Is the reception from the publisher different than the reception from the audience? Is it hard to sell your book to the publisher? Do you find that audiences will pick up on you whether or not you have a clear genre and you're on a certain shelf at Barnes & Noble? Anyone want to start?
I can speak to that. I think the hardest part for me wasn't finding a publisher so much as finding an agent. Because it's genre bending, agents, I mean, I've very frequently heard, this is a really nicely written book and I can't figure out how to sell it. So who do you pitch it to?
Right.
And so I had to find, and I'm very thankful that I found an agent whose taste is a little quirky and who enjoys genre bending stuff. And then once your agent is passionate about it, then she can get out there and sell the book, and then we got some nice attention for that. But I think the toughest nut to crack for me was breaking in the first place.
That's a good point. Go ahead.
All right. I have, the Leaves of Flame is actually the 5th book, so I've been published for a while. My first series under my real name is dark fantasy, but it kind of had an urban fantasy kind of twist to it because it was written in the first person, set completely in one city. I mean, I said it was like the epic quest to go from one side of the city to the other. I think, and then when I came to the second series where I wanted to kind of mix sort of discovering the American Old West kind of with fantasy tropes, I didn't actually have any problems really selling it to DAW. Now DAW tends to be fairly open about what they're interested in and whatnot, as long as it's well written. So I'm lucky in that respect. But I think overall, you kind of want a little bit of a twist like that on it because the publishers want to be able to say, oh, this is dark fantasy, so they can put it on the shelf in a certain location. But they also want your story to have a little bit of a twist to it. So they want the same thing, but they also want it to be different, which seems odd. But I think that's how you make it different, is that you take something that everybody is used to. So you take the idea like I did for an epic dark fantasy, and then my twist to it was, well, what if it's a brand new continent? How am I going to mix the magic in? How am I going to mix all of these other elements in there? Like one of the reviewers said it was like a thriller as well. So how do I mix all of that in? And once I figured that out, that's what makes the book different. So they can say it's an epic dark fantasy, but they can also say, oh, but it's not. Because they can say, oh, it's got all these other elements to it. And a lot of times those other elements is what makes the world different. And at least for fantasy, a lot of the readers are interested in how is the world different. So in that respect, like I said, I think it's kind of essential that you get a little bit of a mix of something else in there in order for it to be interesting to the readers and be interesting to the publisher.
I just knocked your book over. I'm sorry. I had a tough time selling the series for that express reason. A lot of people call the Shadow Op series military science fiction. It's not. It's about magic. It's a fantasy. But people cannot wrap their brains around the possibility that you can have military fantasy. And I'm not talking Glenn Cook. of elves in armor. I'm talking modern, fire team level, you know, hard military stories that involve magic. People were just like, smoke is coming out of my ears, I don't know what to do with this, you know. And
magic smoke?
Magic smoke. Or it could be cordite from spent rounds, who knows. But the point I'm trying to make is that, Joshua nailed it, is that everyone in publishing wants the same thing, because that's safe and they know it will sell. But you're never going to make big money and have big success unless you do something new. The best example I can think of this is Charlene Harris, who did you know, mysteries for a very long time, and then she was like, what the heck, I'll do a story about vampires in the bayou, which became True Blood, which is, you know, one of the most popular series of all time. So publishers want to, and I'm speaking for publishers, so I know I'm going to get smacked upside the head by a penguin when I go back upstairs, but you know, there's that balance between the safe thing, you know, which they know will sell and will please existing fans, because science fiction and fantasy fans get really mad when you don't give them exactly what they want, but also leading the edge and coming up with something new. And so I had taken hard military stories, but also elements of high fantasy and magic, and mixed them into one idea, and it was a real challenge to get someone to believe in that. I like to think it's successful. Time will tell. But I do think that that's the exact thing with genre bending. That's such a challenge, is that it has the greatest potential, or has incredible potential for great success in publishing, and it also has a higher hurdle to cross in getting publishing features.
Blood and Ink had probably the strangest and hardest uphill battle, because it's a fantasy comic, it's steampunk, and there's a female lead. Those are three strikes from the big two in the United States that you're never going to get published from DC or Marvel. You might get a chance at Vertigo, you may get a chance at Max, but I doubt it. So we knew we weren't going to go a traditional route with publishing. That's why we went to traditional novel, you know, prose publishing, because we had a better shot with them. It's something that appeals more story-wise and appeals more towards their sensibilities than it would to American comics publishers. As far as, like, you know, cross-pollination, we knew at Flying Cities, we knew we were gonna, you know, appeal to certain people who like the fantasy flight elements. Steampunk and gears and smoke and lightning guns and airships, all that stuff. That's stuff that Jared and I really like. And we just wanted to throw those things into a story. If we only got one out of it, at least we saw everything that we wanted to see down and on paper and out there. And luckily, very luckily, the fans seem to really love it. So our response has been great, because people come up to us and be like, we love the Flying City aspect of it. We love the city, like almost like its own continent away from everything else. And other people are like, well, I love all the technology stuff about it. I love the world building about it. So it's touching to a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And it's not just staying in one little niche, which is, I think, the beauty of genre bending, you know, across the board.
The publishing side has been pretty well covered. These guys have got it nailed. So I'll talk about the reader side a little. When you're genre blending, you run into two things. One, your readers may not, if they're very traditional in one genre, they may not want to branch out. And you also have the fact that it has to go somewhere on a shelf. And you need to reach the other readers in the genres you're in that it's not on those shelves. But I think readers have been amazing over the last couple of years. Who wanders the bookstore or Amazon in other genres more than you used to? Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, my second book just came out, so I can't really speak from a point of view of a long career, but it's been kind of both frustrating and amusing and really enlightening to watch my publishers, especially my various foreign publishers, try different methods of packaging my book, because they're really not sure where to put it. Is it a teenage YA romance? Is it science fiction? Is it horror? And they will try so many different things. For instance, the US covers, they hit on kind of that dark goth girl YA romance. I really feel like I need to print out reversible covers that have AK-47s and blood on the other side so I can get this into the hands of some boys, because I write from men's point of view in the book, you know? So, and yet you go over to England, and this is kind of funny too, because the US people, they refuse to put a zombie on the cover. They just did for the second one, because they're like, I think that especially with the first book, they were kind of like, we're gonna trick people, they're gonna think they're reading something kind of romantic and Victorian-y, and oh, here we're kissing a dead dude. You know, but would you like it so much by now you won't put it down? Whereas the British people just kind of looked at the spec and they're like, okay, dead dude, we'll put a dead dude on the cover, we'll do it live! So that there's zombies all over the covers on the UK version. It's really interesting to watch the different approaches.
That's so odd that the US didn't want a zombie.
We just,
it just seems so strange.
The sequel, Dearly Beloved, he's on the back, and I'm so excited because they got the stitching on his lip right. I'm so happy.
That's so interesting. Oh, go ahead, please.
From my perspective, as far as reader reaction to a genre-bending book, one of the best things I've heard is that readers who don't typically read in a genre will take a chance on a genre-bending book, and then it will introduce them to a genre that they haven't read in before, and I think that's wonderful. Had some romance readers read my book and have said, wow, fantasy's terrific, and now they're going to start reading more fantasy, so I think that's great.
You kind of reminded me of a question I wanted to ask about covers. When you have a genre-bending novel, have you had arguments or sort of dislikes or like interesting conversations about the covers that you're going to be given? Which is generally they're given, right? You don't get a lot of choice necessarily. Oh, everybody wants to talk about that. Yeah. It's a fascinating subject.
Tor actually came to us and said, "So, what do you guys want to put on the cover?"
Oh.
And
that's nice.
It was refreshing, and I was like, "Well, wait, I get to illustrate it? Are you serious? Awesome!" Yeah. So I got to put everything on the cover that I really wanted to see. So our main character Ash is right there up front in full color, looks great. It's a nice, beautiful sky shot, and you see on the back cover, which is exactly how I planned it, the city off in the distance. You get it gives you the whole world. It gives you the whole idea of the book in one, and I was really, really happy with that. They were just more than accommodating, giving us everything that we wanted, so it was really cool.
Thanks, Tor.
When I first had the cover consult, my editor emailed me and says, "Hey, would you like to have this the cover?" I wrote another book, and sent that to her. And I don't know if folks here read Alona Andrews. It's actually a couple, but one of them emailed me and was like, "Hey, new kid, don't get too excited. They asked you for your inputs, and those inputs have now been thrown in the trash, and they're going to give you the cover they're going to give you." And for me, I have a tremendous sense, since I'm in the military, I have a tremendous sense of ownership over that concept. My own personal inflated sense of ownership. I don't expect any of you to invest in it, but I want the guns right, and I want the fire discipline right, and people have seen my blog posts where I freak out on cosplayers that are pointing guns at me or walking around with their fingers on the trigger. So I had just endless inputs.
It's a scary weekend for you.
And it's really scarier for the cosplayers, for which I apologize. And I had all of these inputs in, and then the cover sketch came, and I was terrified opening that attached image in the email, and they had pulled it out of my brain. And every suggestion I'd made, I'd sent them photographs of gear. I had made all kinds of little points, like you very rarely see a cover of a gun on a novel where the person's finger is not on the trigger. That's very rare. But proper fire discipline in both law enforcement and military is you don't put the finger on the trigger until the front sight is an acquired and identified threat. You've made the conscious decision to fire. So I made that point.
Did you get that?
But if you look at the cover of Control Point, Oscar Britton's finger is not on that trigger. That trigger guard is empty. And they followed it to the T. Now I acknowledge that I got very lucky and that not a lot of authors have that. But my experience with the cover was as positive as it could possibly be, and I feel I've gotten just as fortunate in the second book as well.
I just love Penguin's marketing and art departments because they asked me for input on the cover, and I'm like, I don't know. So they sent the cover, and I was like, oh, I love it, and it was perfect for the series. So I got very lucky, and they are absolutely wonderful.
Oh, where to start? Because I have various foreign deals, and they usually put a different cover on, and the vast majority of them are packaged like this. They're packaged toward, hey, teenage girl, you like bustle dresses? We do too. Open this up. There's lots of bustle dresses. Ignore all the guns, but give your book to your brother. He'll like the guns. And
but take the cover.
Yeah, and a lot of them are very pink, especially the first one. But I really love the UK derivatives because they have, like, unfortunately, I guess they didn't want to reprint it. It wasn't successful, but the very first cover they did for Dearly Departed was like Bram, my zombie guy, looked like a zombie in like a take on a Civil War costume, holding Nora, and there's evil zombies in the background. And I'm like, yes, this is it. This encapsulates my vision because I don't give a crap. You know, I just throw everything in my book, so I love this. But then you get things like the French team decided to package my book into different versions, the young adult and for adult. And so the young adult is basically just this cover with French. The adult is a beautiful hand-drawn artwork of a steampunk city with an airship coming into dock, and it's very evocative. But I'm sitting here looking like, where did you get this idea? Because there's nothing like this in my book. It's beautiful, and I'm going to lord it over the other steampunks. I mean, look what I got.
It sounds like your book.
Yeah, but I'm sitting here going, you know what? I should write that book. So it's really, there's a lot of awesome moments, like when they immediately get the uniform on the first UK cover. It was spot on for Company Z. But then it's kind of a crapshoot.
Whereas my covers are basically the poster child of undecided publishers, especially when it comes to genre bending. Some of the covers I had a lot of input on, some of them I had absolutely no input. I just opened up my mailbox one day and I'm like, oh, I have a cover now. But the first series is a good example where the publisher doesn't quite know how to package it if it's genre bending. Because this is the first book in the Throne of Amancourt series. And the main character is like 14 years old at the start of the book. And so for the cover, they kind of tried to slant it toward young adult, which this came out in 2005, so it was before the huge blow up in young adult. So they were kind of slanting it toward young adult at that time. And but if you follow the series, by the third book, they've totally abandoned that. And the cover for the third book is just this very atmospheric, very dark throne. And that's it. It's just gray. It's very gray. It's got like light coming down from above, but it's very dark, very atmospheric, which in my opinion as the author, it encapsulates what the series is like. It was very atmospheric for that series. So I thought the third book in the series was much, much better representation of what the series actually is. For the new series, where I'm kind of mixing the historical with epic fantasy, the first book, the first cover they sent me looked like a horror cover. And to the point where it's not actually published. The original cover I saw never made it to print. But they sent me the cover. This was the one that came out of the blue, where I like opened up my email and I'm like, oh crap, I didn't even know they were designing the cover yet. And it looked horror. I mean, I handed it around to tons of authors, and I'm just like, am I reading this wrong? Does this really read like horror to you? It reads horror to me, and pretty much everybody said it was horror. It had this big, like, death figure up on top, sort of looming over these figures below, and I'm like, the book is not a horror book. It's got some horror elements to it, 'cause, of course, it's genre bending, but I just emailed them back, and I said, this is how everybody's reading this book, people. And I said, I don't think this is how you want to market it. Or that's because then you're going to pick up the book and think it's horror, and then you're going to start reading it and you're going to go, wait, this is not horror, this is fantasy. It might be dark fantasy, but it's still not horror. At least not what the cover suggested. So I managed to talk them into changing the cover for the new book. And I have a very nice, for the mass market paperback of the first book, Well of Sorrows, it's very nice, like that Throne book, it's very nice, atmospheric, very dark, it's got a figure over a well and whatnot. It looks very, very cool. I was very happy with that one. This one, they actually came to me ahead of time, I guess because they didn't want to waste time. And they actually said, well, here's what we got for the cover, and what do you suggest? And I said, well, this cover sucks. And And so then I said, you know, we need to do this, that, and the other thing. And I was very happy because like Myke down there, they actually listened to me, and I think I came up with with working with them, we came up with a very good cover for the second book. I think it represents the book very well. But you could, just looking at my book covers, you can see the problems the publisher has when you have a genre-bending book. How are they going to market this? Okay, how are they going to capture the right audience for this?
My experience was very similar to Myke's in that they took my input really seriously, and then actually did a lot more with it than I could have imagined. I mean, we just did the cover consult for the second novel, and I gave my editor this enormous list of things that I'd like to see in there, and it had about, I don't know, 12 or 15 different images, like JPEGs attached to it, saying, I mean, this is what I want all this stuff to look like. And then said, with a note with that, because I've got a new editor for book 2, and I said, you know, last time I had this input on the cover, and I'm absolutely in love with the cover. I contacted the artist, and the print is now on my wall. I think it's absolutely beautiful. I saw some of the other covers that he was working on, so people in the back can't see, but she originally, he had covers for her where she's got long hair, and then somebody pointed out, no, you know, the character in the book has short, choppy hair, so he, you know, gets the model back in the studio and shoots her again. And one of the things I really like about this cover is, I mean, you look at it and there's a woman holding a sword, and then there's a layer behind that where it's a Tokyo street, and there's a layer behind that where there's some old ukiyo-e samurai prints, and there's a layer behind that, and it turns out Chris McGrath, my cover artist, goes to Tokyo every year, so he was a perfect choice for me. He's also, he does the Jim Butcher, Harry Dresden covers, which I love. And so, you know, I mean, I gave these things, and I said, well, you know, I mean, here's Mariko, she's, you know, front and center in the book, and there should definitely be a sword on the cover, and, you know, it's in Tokyo, and maybe you could have somebody in the middle of the street, or I had the idea of like a Yakuza guy, my bad guy's a Yakuza guy, and maybe we could have, like, you know, cool Yakuza tattoos with swords or whatever, but I'm not an artist, I don't know what I'm talking about, I just, you know, so it's just like throw a whole bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks, and then, like Myke, you know, I get the email comes in with the attachment, and you just, like, you know, cross your fingers and click on the thing, and I thought it was just gorgeous, so I'm really, really pleased with it. I'm sort of keeping my fingers crossed. Now, I mean, the first request I made for book 2 is please, please, please get me Chris McGrath again. You know, you do that, and I don't care about the rest of it. I know it's going to be good. I mean, I trust his vision at this point.
Do they often not give you the same author or some illustrator if it's in a series?
This is I've had really unusually good luck. So this is my 3rd book, but my first novel. I'm a philosopher by trade, so I mean, I teach philosophy for a living. So I've got the. My girlfriend designed the other 2 covers for the philosophy books. And that one too, like, they have no, in academic publishing, they have no budget for anything. So if they say, do you have any cover ideas? And my girlfriend sort of like whips something together and say, well, something like this. And then
that's what they do.
And then that is the cover. Like, and they don't, there's no cover consult, there's nothing. Like, you just like get this box in the mail, and you open it. Right, yeah, and you open it and you're like, wow, how about that? Like, you know, so, I've had really good luck in that I'm 3 for 3 on covers that I'm very happy with. I know that that's not normal, and I know, like, I mean, I share that same trepidation. I mean, you sort of look at it and say, I mean, there's so many bad covers out there, and you just think, man, I really hope. I mean, people do judge books by their covers. You have to pick it up based on something, right? And if you're walking around and, you know, the bookstore and you see the thing, I mean, sometimes you pick it up by name, and sometimes you pick it up because somebody recommended it to you, and sometimes it's like, that guy looks cool, let's read this, right? I mean, you cringe, and then sometimes you, I mean, it's just like this almost adrenaline rush of, like, relief.
Poor authors.
So Dark Light of Day is my first book, and I have to say I was very pleased with how the cover turned out. A while ago, my editor and I traded some ideas on it, and I gave some thoughts on clothing and setting and different things, which incorporated some of them and not others, and I think their ideas are wonderful, and I love what they came up with. I think, as the other panelists have said, one of the challenges with a genre-bending book is incorporating, kind of signaling to the reader the various elements of the genres represented. And so I like that. I think the fiery sky in the background of my cover suggests the post-apocalyptic setting. And she's holding a fireball in her hand, so that's nice because she wields fire magic. And she's holding books in her hand, so there's an academic component to it as well. So,
this just kind of popped up in my mind. So, like, now that we've talked about covers so much, what happens when, like, what about Kindles? You know, and people, I guess you see the cover once, maybe when you buy it on Amazon, and then never again. Do you think ebooks help or hurt kind of getting people into genres that, well, are into genre-bended books? Or, like, I keep thinking of 50 Shades of Grey and how more and more people can read 50 Shades of Grey on a subway because you can read it on a Kindle. Nobody knows. And you're like, you know, maybe if you're a real, like, hard sci-fi fan, but you might be kind of interested in fantasy. Like, you could read, have you seen, is there any evidence that you have that Kindles help or hurt as far as kind of like getting new fans?
The section where it says, because you read this, we recommend this, is great.
Right.
But the fact that
this is
people
an Amazon
can't,
talk more than anything.
Yeah, but the fact that people can't walk around and pick things up off the shelf, I think does hurt a new series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just from tracking my own sales, I still sell more physical copies than I do ebooks.
Interesting.
And I probably might be because I do write YA. I think perhaps fewer young adults have access to an ebook reader than they do. Then they wander to a store like, hey, Mom, buy this for me. You know. But I think that in my case, I will try a lot of books based in small press, stuff that I would normally not pick up and buy a physical copy of because it's $3, $4 on Amazon Kindle and it goes on my iPad and I give it a whirl. So it probably just your mileage may vary, but.
My ebook sales, I just got my first royalty statement. My ebook sales are 20% of my print sales.
Wow.
And I have no idea how that compares to any other author. That's how it worked out for me. I love my cover, and I think my cover gives me the greatest chance for success. If the Shadow Ops series is really going to be a breakout success, it's going to be a breakout success because it attracts readers of straight, hard military fiction, the Vince Flynn readers and the Tom Clancy readers. And that cover, you look at that cover and you see you're going to get some of that. And there's enough of a fantasy evocation in it as well to attract fantasy readers. And I do think that the Kindle, or not just the Kindle, but ebooks, e-reading in general, harms me in that regard because instead of seeing that larger, awesome, gorgeous cover, you see a thumbnail of that cover. On the other hand, there are all kinds of recommendations and algorithms like you described that can lead people to it. There's also ease of purchase. That a person, you know, in rural Iowa who doesn't have a bookstore within 100 miles of them can simply go on the net, read a blog entry, think the book sounds interesting, and then buy it immediately.
And just try it out.
So from a cover perspective, I think it harms. But from a general and overall perspective, I think it's too new to answer. And that people in publicity and marketing for publishers would probably have much better answers than I would.
I can't speak to electronic ebook sale numbers because my book is a comic and 4-color doesn't work. However, the interior of my book is black and white. So it does show up on the Nook, it does show up on the Kindle, you can read it on electronic ink, it's fine.
What about those comic readers that...
Comixology and whatnot. You have that as well for the iPad and so on and so forth. So it's got versatility and it's got legs that it translates to ebook very, very easily. But I don't know what the sales numbers on it are as far as like electronic sales. I do know it's almost sold out on Amazon. So hooray! So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, I should preface this by saying this book came out 2 weeks ago. So
what are your sales like? I mean, like, you know, you should know.
Yeah, well, apparently they're quite good. I mean, they're running out of books at the warehouse. So, I mean, please, everyone, buy some more, and then they'll do a second. They'll do a second printing. But buy some for all of your friends and family. But I feel like ebook sales are especially good for genre bending stuff because there isn't one shelf that this book is at home on, but Amazon can put it on as many shelves as they want. And so, if you want to look at I don't know where Barnes & Noble is supposed to put this. Right now it's on the new fiction table. Where they're going to put it after that, I don't know. I mean, they don't know. And that's why I needed... Ben's pointing at the word fantasy over here. But it's not straight fantasy, and there's no magic going on the cover. I mean, there's no. It's just a woman holding a sword, and there's no indication that it's magical. I don't know. I mean, I think for genre bending stuff in particular, the ebook revolution is really, really good for us. I mean, and the other genre that's most benefited by it is romance for exactly the reasons you're saying. And nobody can see you reading the romance anymore, so you don't have to be, you know, ashamed of, you know, Fabio on your cover.
So my book, Dark Light of Day, also just came out very recently, so I can't comment on the sales part of it. But just as a reader, I was very glad to see that the covers online are obviously on the digital readers in color now, and I'm thrilled. I love covers, so I never want them to go away. As a writer, I'm thrilled to reach any reader and however you want to read the book. So if you prefer to read in digital, great. If you want the hard copy, that's fine too. I guess it would be nice, covers online in digital form do tend to be very small, and so that's a challenge, but I'm sure in time all of these will be dealt with, and I liked how it turned out.
I was just going to reiterate what Steve said, that the advantage I can see for the gender bending, I knew I was going to do that at some point. From the genre
is it really a woman with a sword?
But the advantage for ebooks for that is that, like Steve said, Amazon and Barnes & Noble can put it in different categories, and it will show up in different categories. If you go into the physical bookstore, the bookstore has to pick one shelf to put the physical copy on for most of your books, because they're not getting in, 20, 30 copies of your book. So if you go into the bookstore, you're pretty much only hitting one potential audience member. Okay, if it's in the fantasy, you're hitting fantasy. If it's in the thriller, you're hitting the thriller. But online, you don't have that restriction. So that's all I had to say.
Another question. I just noticed that there are a lot of female protagonists on the covers, and obviously in your books. Is that something that you were urged towards, or is that your preference? And I see some action happening out there. Do you know your percentages of women to men readers? Who's your biggest fans?
Well,
who are your biggest fans?
To our fans, it's actually pretty split. Everyone is really, really kind of thrilled that we have a female protagonist, and we wouldn't have it any other way. When we conceived of the book, when we conceived of the project, Jared and I both made the choice that it's going to be a female on the cover. It wasn't encouraged by anybody else. It was our decision all the way, as we wanted to see more strong female leads in literature. Right? It's just what it's coming around to. That's going to happen. So, yeah.
My female protagonist is a 6'2" linebacker built bald black guy.
We're all ladies inside.
He's on the cover, and I wasn't consciously seeking to break any barriers having an African American protagonist on the cover, both in the U.S. and UK editions. That choice was made for reasons that serve the story. But I was both surprised and kind of gratified by the reaction I got from it. People were very, very excited about having an African American person on the cover of a fantasy novel. Fortress Frontier to the best of my knowledge, is the first fantasy novel ever with a Sikh on the cover. I think. Now, I don't want to make that claim and someone's going to point out that I'm wrong, but I believe that's the case. I was really concerned that the fact that these are such explosive, gun-heavy, big guys on the cover books would turn off female readers. I have female characters in the story. I worked very hard to get those voices right, and I intended I intended to be a good story. I'm not intending it to be a story for one gender or the other. And I was really worried because the reality of it is that more women read than men. And I want to reach as wide an audience as possible. I don't have specific numbers of how the gender breakdowns are in my audience. I will say that I have enough direct responses from female readers to make me feel reasonably confident that I'm reaching them. If that's, and I don't know why that is. I've had more than one person say that a hot, muscular guy on the cover made them pick the book up. Whatever. I mean, I'll take it.
Fabio too.
In the end, the only thing I'm most worried about, the biggest fear I have in terms of my portrayal of female characters is that a female fan is going to come up to me and say, your female characters are guys with women's names. That is my biggest fear. It hasn't happened so far, and I work very, very hard at making sure it never will.
I just write what the voices in my head tell me to? No. I went with a female main character because that was the story I was going to tell. I will probably at some point write a series with a male main character, and that will be that story. As far as the breakdown of readers, I don't have exact numbers, but they seem to be about 60-40 female to male. So it's reaching a lot of people.
My book actually switches character point of view with every chapter. In the first book, the majority of the chapters are written from the point of view of Nora Dearly, who's my female protagonist, and Bram Griswold, who is my male. But I switch between male-female, I switch between, in the first book, child, and I do have some adult point of view in a YA novel. It was kind of an unspoken urging for the second novel, like no more adult point of view. They actually tried to see if they could take it out in book one, but unfortunately the way the story was told, you need those two characters talking, and they're both Nora's father and the bad guy. But I like to write for multiple generations. I like to write diverse characters, and it's just because I tell people it's because I get really, really bored writing one character all the time, and I want to jump into other people's heads. And I've gotten, I don't have any hard figures, but I've gotten email from 34-year-old businessmen in Germany. I've gotten email from young girls. I've gotten email from teenage boys. I've gotten email from France, and I got an email from Algiers the other day, which was kind of cool. So I'm really glad that it can appeal to as many people as possible.
I write for the story, sort of like what Mike said earlier. The first series has a female main character. That's who popped up into my head. That's who the story was supposed to be about, and so I wrote the female character. I have had people come up to me and say they were shocked to find out I was actually male, because apparently I captured it well enough that they were convinced that the Joshua Palmatier name was a pseudonym and I was actually female, and because that happened, used to happen a lot. Yeah, well, I took it as a compliment as opposed to, a comment on my personality or something. But but the second series, the story, the main character is a young boy. He starts off as a young boy anyway, and because that's what the story was about. And I've never had like an editor, an agent, or anybody like that come to me and say, we really like this story. We want you to rewrite it with the main character, a different gender or different race or anything like that. I've never had that happen. So, and hopefully that never happens to anybody else, but I'm sure it does.
So I said my book covers 4 different periods in history, and so Mariko's story, Mariko is my police detective, and she carries the modern day story, and it's really her book, and all of the other protagonists and point of view characters are male. And I just did an interview, and they're asking me why do I choose Mariko, the one female protagonist that I have, to carry the whole book, and the truth is she forced herself on me. I didn't have a choice. I mean, I'm really interested in, just philosophically interested in problems of alienation. I've felt an alien in my own land frequently, or an alien in my own neighborhood frequently. I mean, well, I mean, this is being Comic-Con. We got lots of nerds here, right? And we feel that, right? I mean, you just feel like you don't fit, right? I'm really interested in that phenomenon where you look like you should fit and you don't, and so for that to happen with a story that's about the samurai ethic and about studying swordsmanship and about police, that all of that pointed me to, if I wanted my protagonist to feel as out of place as possible, she had to be female. Swordsmanship, I mean, even the parts of the thing where she's learning swordsmanship, that wasn't even taught to women in Japan. They learned spear fighting, not sword fighting, for hundreds of years. And only very recently, I mean, her sensei gets to say, hey, look, they would have stripped me of my belt not so long ago for me teaching you at all, right? So I'm really interested in that sort of experience of alienation. And so I wasn't intending hers to be the longest section of the book either. I mean, I wrote all the historical periods totally independently, and then Mariko just took the whole thing over. So, which is exactly, I mean, she's bullheaded and stubborn and strong-willed, and I mean, it just wasn't up to me.
Honestly, I didn't give it much thought. The gender of my character, Noon Onyx, the main character, came to me and I wrote her. I spent a lot of time building the world that she lives in, but she was pretty fully fleshed out when I first thought of her. But I will say the book is written in first person, so it's very much a female perspective on the story. But that said, I have interacted online with both men and women who are reading the book.
Let's see what time it is. We have 15 minutes left, which means we probably actually have 10 minutes left. Do we have a lot of questions? Should we ask another question, or should we go ahead and go to the audience? Who has a question in the audience? Okay, then one more question for me. What has your response from fans been? I know you all kind of pointed a little bit to it in your answers, but what do your fans think, and what do you think of what your fans think?
I kind of showed up at the last minute of the last panel, and Liz, who's my editor, who was sitting on the panel, kind of was like, the artist for the book is here, and suddenly it was the zombie horde, like, oh! and I had a rock star moment a little bit. I was just like, oh, Jesus Christ!
They like me.
Yeah. But other than that, the fan response has been great. Everyone seems to really like the book, and just very encouraging. Keep asking me when the second one's coming. Mm-hmm. Hopefully soon. We'll find out, you know. But they've just been tops, and just lots of support, lots of love, lots of encouragement. So it's been really great.
I'm going to add an addendum to the question. What has been the weirdest question that you've gotten from a fan?
Oh.
Just because I'm curious. Or the most intense question.
I'm waiting on the weirdest question. So if you have a question and it's extremely weird, please bring it to me so I can share it.
Or surprising.
I had a fan ask me on the @open channel on Twitter and mention me if I was a dom. To which I responded, I don't know what that means. And she told me, and then I was like, I'm not going to answer that. I'm not a prude, but I was like, I don't know you, dude. Like, let's have a couple of beers and I'm good and liquored up. I'll tell you.
Are
but
you
like,
married?
My fan responses, I mean, it's been pretty positive. Sales have been good. The book has done very well. The one criticism that I've had that was really surprising to me and has been informative to me is that my protagonist is extremely torn, and he slides between polar extremes, trying to make up his mind about what to do. And what I believed I was doing in having him do that is showing how humans, real humans, deal with crisis, especially when that crisis requires you to turn to your whole life and every institution you've been plugged into and say, sorry, you know, I've got to go rogue. What the incredible thing I realize is that people have an expectation from the military side of it, that people are decisive, that they are heroic, that they are superhuman in that regard. And when you cleave too close, and maybe this is me getting it wrong, to how I believe people really act in crises in terms of decision making, that sucks some of their ability to enjoy it out of it. It certainly has not detracted from the success of the series, but it's been the most consistent complaint. And I'm in the military, writing from this perspective. But what I think happened there, and maybe I'm flattering myself, is that I think that readers have an expectation from a dramatic presentation of what they think the military should be like. And the thing that I was reminded of is my first job is to tell a story, not to indoctrinate anyone into how people make decisions in crises.
Or should.
And that was the most compelling response from my fans. Now, there are different writers out there. Some writers will turn to their fan base and be like, I'm writing the story. This is my story, and if you don't like it, you don't have to buy the book, and I'm not going to make changes. But I was really struck by that recurring theme in reviews. Again, hasn't detracted from the success of the series, but it's certainly something that has definitely entered my thinking as I've moved on into other books.
I cannot top his Dom question. That's just not going to happen. But my fans are the coolest people in the world. The series has slowly been climbing, well, not even slowly, it's been climbing the USA Today bestseller list, so my fans are awesome. Most of the comments I get have to do with when are we killing the Winter Queen, or is the main character going to end up with death, or, yeah, so my questions just can't top Dom.
I love my readers because they are really willing to go along for the ride. I've had some reviews, for instance, both books have gotten very positive reviews from Romantic Times, where they say, Lia throws you into this book and it's sink or swim. And if you can swim, it's an awesome ride, but it's not for everybody. And you know what? I appreciate that honesty. And I'm so glad that I've got readers who want to get into that ride where we're going to mix. I'm throwing like scientific definitions at you. And by the way, that dude's trying to eat you. And it's just a big mess. Weirdest questions I've gotten. I seem to have a tradition at every signing I do, and I always hate to bring the stories up because I know someday they're going to come back to bite me. I seem to have a really crazy woman come to every signing that I do. First signing I ever did, woman comes up to me and she goes, I have something for you. And my brain, which was raised on action and horror movies, immediately thinks, oh my God, she's got a Glock, she's gonna shoot me in the face. She reaches into her purse, she brings out this envelope and gives it to me. And I start to open it, she goes, no, not till I leave. And I'm thinking, anthrax? So I open the envelope, and it is a handwritten, multi-page letter where she is using a medium, the most successful medium in the United States, whose name cannot be out there because she is just so successful, to contact her dead husband, who still believes that she belongs to him, and that if I could use this as the basis of my next best-selling novel. I don't have a best-selling novel yet. I would just owe her, 50%. And I'm like, I'm putting that in a shadow box. Thank you, crazy woman, that's awesome. And then at my last signing, I had somebody come to, when I do my signature, I sign my name and I do a little skull with a heart. And I was signing, and she looks at me and she goes, are you careful with your skulls? And I go, oh, well, sometimes they're wonky and they come out looking like Cthulhu. And she goes, no, your skulls. And I have all this gothic jewelry on. And I'm like, huh? And she goes, skulls can sometimes harbor evil spirits. I know, I work with a lot of crystals and pendulums. And I looked at her, I'm like, I've never had that problem, but thank you for bringing that up. And I drew a skull in her book and pushed it across the table. So I hope to continue that tradition because it gives me really, really awesome things to bring up, and please don't hunt me down, crazy people.
Yeah, I think we've all had the crazy people. My fans are great because I tend to take risks in my book, in all of my books. I like to play with people because when you pick up a fantasy book, you have an expectation of what it is, and I like to set you up, and then I like to twist it at the end. So, like for the Ben Tate series, the first book, there's really no magic for probably about half the book. But then when you hit magic, it's like slams you in the face and knocks you down, and I wanted the characters to go through that because they're exploring a new continent. So that's a huge risk on my part, or was a huge risk on my part, because you can turn people off that way. I mean, fantasy readers want to see magic within the first couple chapters, kind of thing. And but all of the people that have written reviews about the Ben Tate books have one of the things they've said is that they absolutely love the fact that I take all of these risks. There's this, you know, halfway through the book, I do this one thing, and you're either going to love it or you're really going to hate it. And I mean, the fans have been incredibly supportive of all of the risks that I've taken with the Ben Tate books, and I'm thankful that the publisher allowed me to take those risks as well. The oddest question story actually goes with the Joshua Palmatier books. I went to my very first signing. The book had just come out, and so I went to my very first signing up in Flights of Fantasy up in Albany, New York. And so I'm all excited. You know, I expect nobody to show up because who the hell am I? And but you know, they had a packed room and all this, and so they get to the question phase of it, and the story is about a young girl who's raised in the slums of the city. You know, she's barely surviving, and then through the course of the book, her life changes when she gets trained to be an assassin. And so, you know, I'm thinking all these questions are going to come about, you know, writing the female perspective. All, you know, I anticipated a bunch of questions, but the question that threw me was, somebody raised their hand and they go, "Why doesn't Varys have a pet?" And Varys is the main character, and so, like a cat. And you know, I'm absolutely stumped because I'm just like, never expected this question in a million years. And so what I said was, I can't believe I said this, but I leaned forward and I said, "She's raised in the slums. She would have eaten it." And because that's the truth. That's what would have happened. I mean, she's starving at the beginning of the book, and like everybody burst out laughing. But of course, the woman that asked the question was just like, "How could you? You know, I have like 50 cats at home. You know, how could you eat a cat?" And everything. But that was the most bizarre question I've had so far. You guys can try to top it if you want.
The question I was asked last week was, "Would you sign my baby?"
With permanent marker?
Permanent marker, yeah. I'll tell the woman who asked that question that you all clapped. She'll be proud of it. I think the picture of the baby signing might be on Facebook, actually, from the thing of it.
Where? On the baby?
On the belly.
On the belly?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the weirdest question I've been asked. Like I said, the book has only been out for 2 weeks, so in terms of fan response, I mean, at this point, it's, you know, my mom really liked it, you know. And she's sort of obligated to like it, so you know, that doesn't really count.
All moms are so nice.
Right. That's right. So far, I've got more attention. I mean, the advanced review copies were getting some really nice attention from critics that I was very happy to see. I haven't had a chance to interact with a whole lot of fans with it since the thing is 2 weeks old. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward for that next step.
I do not have a bizarre question to share. But I will say I've been thrilled with the reception so far to Dark Light of Day. It is new, so I don't have a lot of fan stories. But I will say one reaction has been, it's written in first person, as I said, and it has a very youthful tone to it, almost a YA feel, but not, I mean, it is written for an adult audience. But so that's been challenging. I've kind of been trying to make my message to readers that this has a youthful tone to it, because I feel like as an author I want to share with potential readers what they're getting, and then you can make a decision about whether this appeals to you or not. So, but I'll have to keep an eye out for the unusual question to share.
It's coming, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So we have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to open it up to audience questions if anybody has a question.
I did want to say we all like more fans, so you know, go out and buy all of our books.
The weirder the better. Lady blonde.
With all the stuff dark stuff that happens in some of your books, have you ever had problems with censors? Like publishers have ever
anything too dark?
Oh, that's too dark. You can't do that.
I actually tried to tone down a lot of the open gore in my books because I wanted that zombie cannibalism aspect, but I didn't want to go too far because it's for 16 and up. And I actually was told to put more gore in. So I was like, really? Score! So I really ramped that up, and I was told to ramp the language up too. I remember going through with Find, and every instance of hell, I tried to change it to something else, except when you just couldn't. It was right for the story. And I was told, no, you don't have to do that. That's okay. So.
At the time that I wrote Control Point, I mean, I was both in the military reserve and civilian at the Department of Defense, and I had to put my book through a publication review process. When I first told them, I was like, it's okay, guys, it's about sorcerers. And they were like, nope, they're military sorcerers, we need to read it. I mean, they blinked and approved it. It wasn't a problem, but like, I just thought that was an interesting byline for the question. But yeah, as long as you remain a member of the military or employed by the government, you do have a publication review obligation. You have to let them read it.
I would love if they critiqued it, though. If they critiqued the magic, that would be really awesome.
No.
But, I don't know if that's really believable.
The reason that the process exists is to stop, former spies who are writing tell-alls from revealing secrets. But an example of what happens when you don't follow that process and you don't take it seriously is you get No Easy Day, which in my opinion is a tragedy. So, like, as cumbersome as that process is and as irritating as that process is, because when you produce a work of art, you're like, yeah, I want to get it out, you gotta go, you gotta go through that process.
Yeah, and obviously I read dark fantasy, so I've never had my editor tell me to tone it down or anything like that. In fact, the biggest critique I've ever gotten from my editor at DAW is that they want more. In fact, I've had that with pretty much every single book, where they read it and they say, you need more of this, you need more of this, more world building, more depth, more character, blah, 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 blah. So they've always asked me to add more.
I guess I'll just add really quickly. I had a scene at the very end of my novel that was almost not too horror. I don't know that you can do too horror, but I was asked to just make it a little less horror. So I found that interesting. I like how it turned out. It was a good editorial suggestion.
Yeah, with this book, I didn't get any comments about anything being too dark, which I don't know what that says about the thing. I mean, there's beheadings aplenty, and that's not too dark. In the next book, there's a character who's I find torture to be extremely morally problematic, and so when I have a character torture another character, I don't want, like, it's Jack Bauer 24, like, it's perfectly fine to torture people so long as, you mean the best out of it. And I think it's just really, really a bad idea to chain somebody to a chair and make them defenseless and then hurt them. So I mean, there is a torture scene in there, and because I find it morally problematic, people find it tough to read. My agent, when she read the thing the second time, skipped that chapter. And didn't tell me to cut it, so it's still in there. It'd be interesting to see what my editor has to say about it. But
I'm having total deja vu right now, as I feel like I've heard an author before talk about torture, and it seems like most people don't like torture, or have bad feelings against it. But writers will write about it to almost exercise those feelings.
I always feel like you see the scene with, like, James Bond strapped in the chair, and the bad guy gets out all those little, like, shiny instruments, and like as soon as you open that little envelope of instruments, oh yep, here's the nuclear codes. Like, I'll tell you, absolutely. I keep the key to my house under the little rock. Like, I'll tell you everything. I mean, I should not be a spy. Like, as soon as you chain me to the chair, I'm yours. Like, I mean, just tell me. Any question you want me to answer, I'll confess to the JFK assassination. Anything.
You would be a terrible spy.
I'm really, really bad.
You had a question? No? Oh, time's up? Oh, time's up? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, thank you so much for coming. Oh, the signing. Oh, yeah, sorry. Also, there's a signing in the autograph area at 4:45 to 5:45.
And please come back and ask questions then.
Please.